and all caps on individual words that I would hit or stress if I was sitting in front of you speaking. My hope is that when you read it, some of that will ooze out of the screen and you'll hear my voice as you're reading it.
Now, unfortunately, with the texters, they use all caps as shouting. So if you send them, why did you shout at me in that message? I was not. It was an emphasis thing. Anyway.
I have a very hard time, and most people do, but I have a very hard time reading a text that has more than one idea and no punctuation in it. Because my mind just races with the possible interpretations of it if you read it different ways. I just heard chat again.
I just heard a blip.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, you know, again, because I've been dipping my toe into audiobook stuff. You get a lot of blah, 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 he said. And so that is a writer's, when you're writing for the eye, that is an indication of who it is. When you're doing it as an audio thing, there's a lot of discussion of like, well, this whole block is he said, and we know it's him because of the topic and the context. So should you drop the he said or leave it in?
Would the he said be at the end of the statement?
It can be anywhere. He said, I want to go to the store, or I want to go to the store, he said, or I want to go, he said, to the store. All those constructions show up in books all the time.
Sure, yeah.
And so
yeah, it's super interesting, and I think it's part of the reason why I am a horribly slow reader, because as I'm reading things, I'm constantly like analyzing and critiquing it and thinking about how I would have written it differently to make it more clear.
Yeah, it's an interesting subtlety of doing something created for one medium and translating it to another medium, and how much do you honor the conventions of the first medium and bring them across to the second medium? It's just a small, interesting topic.
There was a phrase that I heard Mr. Sorkin say in an interview recently. It was an old interview, but I listened to it recently. He called it casualizing the language, in terms of like writing dialogue.
And then you get the video part added on.
What I was going to say is that's an important thing anytime we're putting people on camera, because 90% of what people write is written to be read, and now you need to kind of casualize that language. I find it very difficult when there's a lack
usually
of...
actors do that interpretation on set.
Actors do, but I don't get to work with actors. I work with business people who don't belong in front of camera, and yet today they're going to be in front of a camera.
Yeah, that's, he said angrily. Well, the actor can do that. You don't even need the words in the script, as long as the script indicates angrily. And so, yeah, that's why the editor has so much determination.
I used to read prompters, and I would read just like Ron Burgundy. I would read exactly what was up there without paying attention to what I was actually saying. And I got into a lot of trouble, or they used to pick on me.
Actor turns to camera and says, "Who wrote this stuff?"
I worship at the altar of intention and obstacle. Another Sorkin line I've heard multiple times.
Once again, thank you all panelists for being here. I appreciate it. Have a great show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can always find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour, we do a general discussion of production and IT-related topics where we answer your questions. That's anybody who gets into the Mukana system on the back end can pop in a question, also vote on those questions, and then that's what runs our show. The questions that have the most votes go first, and we hopefully spend more time on those, and we just go down the list until we're out of questions. Second hour is typically a deeper dive into a topic, and today we're talking to the LumaTouch folks. The LumaTouch Multicam Studio will be one of our focuses, so Chris and Terri will be here from LumaTouch to talk about Multicam Studio. That's our second hour. Right now, we're going to dive into our general Q&A. Let's see. I think Mitch is reading today. So, Mitch, what do we got?
Bill, thank you. First question in from Robert Shoji in Los Angeles, California. Robert asks, what entry-level key and fill lights under $300 do you recommend for a basic interview setup?
I'm going to start with David here.
I'm a big fan of the Elgato lights, the Key Light and the Key Light Mini, or Key Light Air, sorry. So the Elgato Key Light is $150. That's actually down in price. When it came out, it was $200. The Key Light Air is $130. I'm using two Key Lights right now. What I love about them, and this isn't unique to them, but I can clamp them right onto my desk. I've got a sit-stand desk, so I clamp them right on. They're able to go up and down with me. I can control them wirelessly, either through the computer or through my iPad, or I have a button set up on my Stream Deck that turns them on and off. Easy to use. They're can be a little glitchy sometimes, but all in all, really good products.
And Mitchell Hill.
Yeah, I agree with David. The Elgato is a good choice. If you're going to move through the ecosystem of key and fill, the Nanlite people have a number of different options. They have the Pavo tube, which Alex has been known to use when he's traveling. And they also have a thing called a mix panel, which I'm using as a fill light over here and a hair light over here, although it doesn't need to work as hard for my hairline. And over and above that, then you get into very expensive stuff like I have a light panel Astra Soft, but that's way out of that price range.
John Preto, what say you?
Wow, a third option here. So the lights that Tom Ferguson recommended for the $10,000 studio are the Godoc's DS45s as a key and a fill. And then for the money left over to keep you right at $300, the Godox CL10 as a kicker on the back for $300. Good deal.
There you go, Alex Lindsay. Alex, good morning.
Good morning. I'm pretty happy. We have a lot of NAND lights. And the main thing to think about is for your key is really a large source. So you can have the NAND Light 68s are pretty large. I think they're about 24 by 18 or something like that, or something in that ballpark. That big source really makes a lot of people look good. So think about that. It can be a diffuser. The big thing you don't want to do is buy something that's really small. That's going to be very sourcey. It usually picks up everybody's imperfections. So the larger the source is, the better for most average lighting. There's a lot of people that can do really fine tuning, but if you're talking about something that's cost effective, look at something also that potentially has a chimera or something that's going to give you a nice big boxy source. And that's going to make almost everybody look better than they normally look.
Chris Fenwick.
I was just corresponding with our friend David Brady yesterday, and he said he just flashed the firmware on his NAND lights, and he now has remote control of them.
Which ones?
I don't know. It's the ones that he uses for his ice blue background.
There's just so many.
Yeah, I think it's like the little ones. I don't know.
Oh, they're the little ones, yeah.
It's something to look into. Can you imagine? How cool is that? Like, you buy a thing and you use a thing, and then just like, magic new software, and it's a whole new thing. Fun.
Very nice. Let's see. Moving on to Courtney Gooden.
Well, if you want cheap, a good choice of the ones that I'm using here, these Neewer, it's hard to beat this price. That it's $176 for two lights. I'm going to try and show it to you here if I can get my switcher in the right position. Okay. It's two lights with a carrying case. These are bicolor lights. They're tunable between tungsten and daylight. They have a built-in battery. They have AC, and they have a carrying case, two 13 inches, and they're nice and smooth, and it's similar to something that I'm using right now. For $176 for two of them, including the stands, you can't beat that.
Yeah, that's a pretty amazing deal. Mitch Hill, you wanted to recall?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in. I'm going to make a suggestion. I know it's very tempting to use those ring lights, but the problem with the ring lights, keep in mind, is that they reflect into your eyes unless you have lucky to have it in the right spot. But for the most part, you can tell people right away have ring lights because they get that strange iris going on because it's reflecting the light directly back into your glasses or eyeballs.
Yeah, I think you've gotten a lot of really good advice here, and it's amazing how many lights there are at the lower price points that do a really good job. I have a couple of small, newer fill lights that I'm using for my facial fill. I have a larger soft box up above, and we've talked about this. The bigger the source that's apparent to your face when you're being lit, the less kind of blemishy you look. It's just how light works coming in at different angles of incidence. So it was brought up that the idea of some sort of mounting system, speed rings are the traditional things that you put in front of a point source light to spread it out and make it a softer thing. If you use that kind of system, you want a little more punch to the light. So all those things goes into figuring it out, but I think you've gotten some really good suggestions here, Robert. So let us know how it works out. Let's go to the next question.
From John Preto in Las Vegas, USA. In a surprising move, Japan's government recently reaffirmed that it will not enforce copyrights on data used in AI training. Thoughts?
John Preto will start us off. John?
This is the exact case that's pending now with Midjourney and Stability AI. And as an artist, do you want your materials used in the training model? And Japan is saying no here. I haven't done complete fact check on this story yet. There's conflicting stuff I'm seeing out on the inner tubes. But this will be a landmark decision if they make this decision not to prosecute copyrights on building the training model.
Yeah, this is the beginning of a lot of discussion of this. Courtney, your thoughts?
The big question is, whose copyrights laws are they going to adhere to? Japan's, or the United States, or Europe's, the EU? It doesn't say, so I'm curious because the United States copyright laws exceed almost all those in other countries where it's almost 100 years these days. So that could incorporate a lot of masterworks from the 20s and 30s and so on. But how they're going to enforce it is another thing I don't understand.
Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, when a specific country says we're not going to enforce those laws, I don't know whether this is true or not, but when they do that, what they're saying is this is a place to innovate. So they're basically saying you can do whatever you want in Japan. And what that's going to do is that there will be, if the United States closes up that market, this is what I think Japan's trying to kind of force the issue of going, we want to move forward. If the United States closes it up for, or the EU or both, the place to do this will be Japan, and you'll see a lot of innovation and moving and so on and so forth in a way. And so it's basically threatens the United States and EU of falling behind in the process because a lot of companies would just move to Japan. So they or they'd move their servers or whatever they need to do that. It's very hard to stop people from using those training models if those models are used in one place and not the other. It's just hard to know where it all comes from. So it'll be very complicated if the countries all don't work together, and Japan has shown that it probably won't work together. It's going to be very hard to suss all of this stuff out and enforce it. In general, I think that it was probably fair as to say it's going to use it, but it also can't be copywritten. So if you do those two things at the same time, it's kind of even. If you're going to create content with it, with copywritten material, you can't copyright it yourself. If the machine makes it, I think that's a pretty fair, even thing. I don't think the United States. I think that they're going to have a hard time getting the court to understand how looking at images is a violation of copyright.
Chris Fenwick.
Yeah, I agree that looking at images, this is a huge discussion. We can't get into it now because, time. But I want people to think about this. We want to call all of this innovation artificial intelligence. And either the computer or the artificial intelligence is creating something or it's copying something. You, if I were to hop on a plane, not going to happen. Go to the Louvre, stand in front of the Mona Lisa, absorb it, am inspired by it, and then I go and I buy a canvas and I paint something because I have been exposed to a piece of art and am inspired by it. Am I not creating something of my own, and can I not copyright that? So is this artificial intelligence being inspired by something? And if so, what's the big deal? But if it's copying it, then it's different. So I don't understand why the conversation about Alex just raised his hand. He doesn't like it. It's something I said. I don't understand why this is even an issue if it's truly artificial intelligence. It's not. It's some sort of copy and paste with some feathered edges. It's a super. I think there's an interesting conversation. I don't know how to word it all, but I want people to think about what is the difference between an artist watching, a beautiful Bob Ross painting being painted and then being inspired to go and try and paint something. Is it inspiration or is it copy and paste? You can't copyright. Your copyright can't keep me from being inspired by your work.
David Paskin.
I have no idea how you enforce any of these laws. So this bothers me because it's completely impractical. I'm far more interested in what BART is beginning to do. Now, BART is in my opinion, it's a far less superior product than some of the others. But the fact that they're starting to, when you generate an image, it will give you links to where it found that inspiration, as you just said, Chris. That to me, let's give credit. It's important to give credit, but this idea that we're just going to lock down the web, to me, is just absurd.
Courtney Gooden.
And I'm confused by the statement. I'm not sure if it means that they will not enforce Japanese copyrights for people that use the Japanese-based artwork in their AI model, or does it mean that they will not enforce copyrights of other countries when used in a generative AI that's generated in Japan? So I'm not sure what they mean by this statement that they will not enforce copyrights, because it doesn't say whose copyrights they will not be enforced.
Alex.
Looking at the statement last night, the impression I had is that they're basically saying they're not going to enforce copyright law on these things. They consider the generative AI to be its own thing, and they're not going to, so you're not, if you're doing it in Japan, you're not going to have to, no matter what the other countries do, they don't consider that valid in Japan. And that's going to give Japan a huge leg up if anything happens in the other countries. And anybody who wants to hedge it. So what'll happen is as court cases start to run in the United States and Europe, if they look like they're not running well, people, servers will start getting moved to Japan. So like that's what's going to happen. And that's what Japan's, I think, what they're angling for is to, they're trying to be on the front edge of this rather than on the tail edge. The problem is that you don't want to be on the tail edge because there is no way to stop the front edge, as David was saying. By making this open source and by opening up a lot of this stuff and making it available to everyone, it's impossible to put the genie back in. Like, and that was done on purpose. It was, done on purpose to, like, we're going to release all of this so that there's no way to stop it. So that's the fundamental issue. It's not really copy and pasting in the way that we would think of it. It's an interesting thing because it's, every pixel is the way it's the image, it's not cutting. I wish it would cut and paste sometimes. Sometimes I get images out of it that I wish it would just cut and paste what I wanted in there rather than, but it's generating those images from, it is in the same way that, very similar in the way that we think about those things. It's just that it has a much larger source to work from than the average human being. As it puts it together. The best way to think about it is if you take it's really kind of a fun thing to do. You open up your phone and just type a word in and then just only use, we talked about this before, but only use the next words that the iPhone thinks you want and just start tapping on those and you can build a whole little story that comes together. That's how it's doing that. It's just at its scale. It's coming up with the next thing and it's putting that together. I think that, so I think that it's going to be really, a fascinating, process as we start to watch it. But I don't think that there's any way to. We have to stop, as David said, we have to stop thinking about how we're going to stop AI, because it's not the process is not stoppable. Like it's not. And I think that we spend a lot of time trying to stop things in the world that are, inevitable, rather than figuring out, well, what are we going to do about that? And so, and I think that that's the, like it's how to dance with it, not how to, you can maybe slow it down a little bit. But even I think all of these folks that are saying we should regulate it are just trying to get rid of their competition. They think that's the issue.
Or catch up.
Yeah, I mean, or yeah, but I think that a lot of them that are in the front say, oh, we should regulate it now because that's good for them.
I just wonder if we're going to get to a point where you see a swoosh on a shoe and you have no idea where it came from, because that swoosh for the next generation was generated by AI, and now everybody can use it because nobody owns it. So all the shoes have the same swooshes, and we can't tell one from another. I don't know. This is really a complex thing that we're moving into.
Again, the one thing I'll say is that I don't think that I don't think that the real danger is copyright. Like I think that that's an old thought. So what's happening here is that if you look at TikTok and you look at generative AI and everything else, the real danger is that no one's going to care about the copywritten material anymore, because they're generating so many things that bring them, joy and bring them interest and solve their problems. Like I would never go back to stock photography. Like it might take me a little bit of time to do it, but I generate everything for my presentations. I used to spend a couple $100 every presentation to buy stuff off of iStock or someone else so that I'd get just the right photos, and I'd have all this stuff. And now I generate it all out of Midjourney, and I would never go back. And that's so iStock isn't. It's not a matter of, I'm not even selling it. I'm just using it. And that's the thing, is that people can just build this stuff. If you start to watch the videos, I don't know if you've seen the long series of Wes Anderson versions of movies. They're hilarious on YouTube. And that's just the beginning. Wait until he can really animate those. Like wait until they can build movies where they're just generating little trailers for Wes Anderson films that everyone's moving around and not just kind of jerked around a little bit. And the thing is that's it's going to be so compelling. Like if you look at our kids, my kids anyway, 80% of what they watch is YouTube, not broadcast. And so I think that's the behavior that we're going to see in the future.
Courtney, real quick, and David, real quick, and then we'll move on.
There's a solution to this. The legal solution would be to get everybody to agree to scrape all of the copyright law into an LLM and have a AI judge, come up with an answer.
Cyber court is in session. David, finish things up for us.
Yeah, there was a fantastic talk given by Sal Khan, the founder of Khan Academy. I think it was last month in TED. He talked about how they're integrating AI into Khan Academy. And what was just so fascinating about it is that there's so much worry about AI and how kids are going to have AI write their papers, things like this, and how Khan Academy has looked at this and said, okay, we cannot put, as Alex said, we cannot put this genie back in the bottle. How can we use it for good? And they've created some really exciting and innovative uses of AI in their program. And this to me, less about the specifics, but more about the approach and the attitude. This to me was really inspiring, and I think how we should be moving forward.
I was going to move on, but Alex, have the last word.
Yeah, just to build on that, just for 1 second, we were talking about this yesterday in a meeting that I was in, and the ability to customize education is going to revolutionize what we're doing, and it'll be interesting to see what Khan Academy does. But one of the things that I started doing with ChatGPT is asking it to write me a story about this or tell me about horses with a Lexile score of 800. Lexile is how we measure the complexity of paragraphs and words, so that you can tell where kids are reading at. What I realized is that you could just have kids read about whatever they're interested in, like have ChatGPT as it matures, just tell them about things that they're interested in, whether it's horses or rockets or baseball or whatever. But you're just telling it to keep on ratcheting up the Lexile score slowly over time, and it would just slowly build up their capacity to read more and more complex things. But they're not reading. The problem when you get into high Lexile is that it's all boring books. And so the thing is they just read about whatever they want. It just uses bigger diction, bigger words to tell those stories. and it would massively accelerate kids because they're now reading something that they're actually interested in. In the same way, you could have them write. The best way to know whether someone knows something is to write those papers. But instead of having it be something, right now teachers can't do a lot of that because it takes too long to grade them. ChatGPT could just look at their papers, break down all the things structurally that they could have improved, show them where all the errors are, and give them a whole bunch of feedback as well as a general score of what they're doing. It would also know whether another AI wrote it, most likely, because it would be too perfect. But it would be able to tell all those things, which means you could have kids writing papers all the time about about things that they love, not about whatever they get assigned. You have to, and the customization of learning is going to be incredible as AI starts to take off.
Let's move on to the next question.
Next one in from Johnny Stewart in London, UK. Can the panel recommend a simple, lightweight background app to add audio latency to an external mic to sync with an external camera other than OBS? Alex, help us out.
If you're in OBS, I'm assuming you're on a PC. If you're on a Mac, you should not be using OBS. I know it's a bad idea. So I think that on a Mac though, you could use audio hijack, and that will, it has its own latency, it has its own delays that are built in. I believe that for some reason I realized I was thinking about noise, but I think that there's some processing either in the NVIDIA card or in one of the vegetable things, the potatoes or the pineapple, audio pineapple, or whatever those things are. That's such a horrible name. Anyway, I think they have a delay in there.
Mitchell?
Johnny, keep in mind there is a fix for this. It doesn't require an app. Plug your mic into the camera directly, and it'll be coincidental with the video. Just make sure it's a mic with or a camera with a decent preamp, and it's not noise.
And be wary of your sample rate. Don't forget, this is your chance. We always welcome additional questions, and you're voting on those questions. That's the process, and the more votes a question gets, the sooner we get to it and the more time we spend on it. So you really do drive the show, and there's opportunities to do that. Let's go on to the next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin asking, I have a vMix laptop with Thunderbolt 4 connection. We're connecting a Sonnet box, Decklink enclosure, which supports Thunderbolt 3. It only works if I use a Thunderbolt 3 cable. Why is a Thunderbolt 4 cable not working? Using the same cable with OWC Thunderbolt 4 Dock, it works flawlessly.
Alex, that seems odd.
Support on the PC for Thunderbolt is spotty. So there's probably extra circuitry in the OWC box, which is got a little bit more to it than the Sonnet. So the Sonnet is probably the base format, where the OWC's probably got some additional circuitry to kind of make that work with either 3 or 4. But if it's a straight TB4 to a PC, I didn't think that Thunderbolt 4 is even supported on a PC. So getting it to work on the OWC is interesting that you were able to get that to do that. So congratulations that the OWC works, but it is not normal. Usually Thunderbolt 3 is, I believe, the highest that's supported on the PC typically.
Thank you for that. I'm really surprised because I always thought that a 3 cable would have limitations. The 4 would have that plus everything else. This really helps me understand it better. Let's move on to the next question.
From Tim Home in San Lorenzo, California. I have not actually entered into the world of Zoom ISO. If I was to experiment, should I use the Zoom version or Andy's version? And what are my first steps towards learning to use the system?
Start us off, David Paskin.
So the good news is Andy's version is the Zoom version. Andy and liminalet.com created Zoom ISO and Zoom OSC. They have been acquired by Zoom, and so Andy now works at Zoom. The Zoom ISO and Zoom are 2 different products, and yet they share the same sort of underlying structure of Zoom. So it's a separate client, Zoom ISO. It'll look a little bit different when you're joining a meeting, and certainly there are many, many more settings, which include who you want to ISO, how many ISOs do you want to embed audio, things like that. As far as getting started, I know that Liminal ET has a whole bunch of videos on their website. That's a good place to start. Andy is in this community, and a whole bunch of us use it all the time. So hit us up in Discord. We'd love to help you out.
Chris Fenwick.
You know, Tim, I think the first question you want to ask yourself when you start jumping into Zoom ISO is, do you want to go the hardware route, or do you want to go a software route where you're and I'm drawing a blank.
NDI.
NDI, yeah, thank you. Do you want to pull your ISOs via NDI and get them into your switching matrix that way? Or do you want to do what I do at the very, very low end of the scale, or what Office Hours does at the very high end of the scale? Because that's what we're doing. We're using Zoom ISO and pulling everybody's feed into, giant switching matrix. I'm using, FireWire off of a little Mac Mini. I prefer, because it just works for my head, I prefer the hardware route. But either way, if you want to get started, you can use, a bare bones, off the shelf Mac Mini, get a couple of FireWire, or not FireWire, how old am I? HDMI outputs, and you can start learning how to work it. The best thing to do, frankly, is to get into a Zoom meeting. I think we even do it in after hours, where we'll allow people to, pull some pins and experiment with it. That's what I did, and that's how I learned it. Hardware.
Alex.
Yeah, I would highly recommend Zoom ISO myself. The video quality is, and the video frame rate is higher, and it's a higher quality than what comes out of the HDMI. So you're actually getting a better video from Zoom ISO because of how it handles the frames. So it's a more direct route to get it out, and you're able to send it out over NDI or over SDI or over Siphon if you're on a Mac. So if you're, it is a Mac-based solution, but it is far superior than I would never go back to grab, screen scraping. We've done it. I mean, for a lot of stuff we've already moved over, but 090 is completely getting, we're about to ditch the entire PC structure that we have for Zoom ISO to because it just doesn't make any sense anymore. So I think that it's far superior to that. I would highly recommend it. And a little preview is that if you have more questions about it, Andy and Adam Tao will be joining us next Thursday. There's some new stuff they want to talk about that is more applicable to next week, and they're gonna do that. But usually it's open to general questions as well. Yeah, Christian.
Alex, can I get a clarification on something you just said?
Mm-hmm.
You said that what is better than HDMI?
The Zoom ISO output, like to SDI or to NDI or to Siphon, is a higher quality video. I don't know about HDMI because I don't use Zoom ISO with HDMI because I use it with SDI, but it is definitely a higher quality video than what we see from just a straight screen scrape.
Screen scrape. Okay.
I mean, whatever. If we use a display, a monitor out of our thing without Zoom ISO, if we just do the Zoom thing where we have another monitor and it goes out, that's at a lower quality than what Zoom ISO puts out of our SDI feed. We've compared them side by side, and it's definitely color looks better, frame rate looks better. It's a cleaner signal.
So I think the clarification I was looking for is you said better than HDMI. I am using Zoom ISO, but I'm using it with HDMI, which I understand.
No, that's fine. I'm saying
okay.
when Zoom ISO is asking to, I don't have any experience with Zoom with the HDMI I do is using a Zoom page, but if you're using Zoom ISO,
okay,
it should work fine with HDMI. My experience is all SDI Zoom ISO because it's just easier for me.
Next question, please.
John Foltz from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, weighs in with this question. When screen sharing a Mac Mini to Apple TV, what's the best way to get audio to the Apple TV?
Courtney, help us out.
I'm probably the least qualified here on the panel to answer this, but I'll give it a shot. AirPlay, I believe, takes audio and video to the Apple TV. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Alex. It should go along with your video image to the Apple TV, and it should show up as an audio output on your screen or whatever HDMI connection you're making to your Apple TV.
And Alex.
Yeah, the only question is really how you output it, and what the real question is how do you route different things to it, which is I think your problem. Because if you're just sending out video from YouTube or from QuickTime or whatever, it's just going to take the audio with it and send it to the Apple TV. If you're trying to send out something specific, you're probably going to need some of the Rogue Amoeba tools, whether it's airfoil or there's a bunch of different airfoil or loopback or a variety of those things to route the things that you want if you're trying to send out specific things that aren't just embedded audio with the video.
There you go. David Paskin, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just from within Apple TV, you can actually access your computer. There's a computer icon that comes up, and you can. So if you have apps, not apps. If you have files in iCloud and things like that, you can sync those together and access those and find them right on your Apple TV.
John, hope that took care of everything. Let's move to the next question.
Robert Shoji from Los Angeles, California. What's a 2.4 gigahertz wireless mic system that you can recommend for use? Rode, DJI, or whatever? Does DJI or Rode make an external lav that works well with their 2.4 gigahertz wireless system?
Mitch, start us out.
Yeah, the 2.4 world is certainly in the lower price range, and you compare it to the UHF devices out there, astronomically more expensive. In an interviews type situation or close to it, it's probably going to work fine, and I would recommend a Rode Go 2. And if you need an external lav to plug into it, although the Rode Go 2 does have a internal microphone, just their device they call the Lavalier 2 can plug into that 3.5 millimeter connector on it. And the price range, they make a package that has 2 transmitters and 1 receiver. It'll work with your camera and work really well with you. And as Alex has mentioned before, make sure you don't put that 2.4 transmitter on your back. Otherwise, it's got to try to broadcast through that ugly bag of water we call our bodies.
There you go. David Paskin.
I'm also a Rode Go guy. So this is one of the transmitters from the Rode Go 2. It does have a microphone up here at the top. I've got the receiver over here, and there's another transmitter. One little hint, by the way, do not leave these little guys plugged in all the time because your battery will, there we go, your battery will start to bulge, and then you'll end up with that. The really nice thing, so the Rode Go 2 comes in at $300. They just announced the Rode Wireless Me. And what's interesting about the Rode Wireless Me is that there's just a single receiver and transmitter, but this receiver also has a mic on it. So you're kind of getting 3 for the price of 2 a little bit, minus some functionality and plus some additional functionality. That comes in at $150. I use the Rode Interview Go sometimes, which is this little guy here, and your mic just kind of sticks right in here. And then you can put a windscreen on top so you've got a handheld. But here's the kind of the best part about using the Rode stuff. If you have a Rodecaster Pro 2, or the new Rodecaster Pro 2 Mini Happy Go Lucky thing, whatever it's called, there's a wireless receiver built in. So now when I want to use this transmitter, I actually never fire up my receiver anymore. I just have this linked to my Rodecaster Pro and it just works. So really that's, and I have it on a dedicated channel. I can mute it, unmute it. So if I'm doing something where I'm actually sitting with someone on that side of my office, I will mute this mic, just bring this over, pop it in, turn that on, and we're good to go.
I'm hoping somebody's not out there typing in a search for Rode happy-go-lucky thing right now. Courtney Gooden.
I bought and like the DJI because this is the case that it comes in, which I don't think the Rode comes with the case. You can order one that has a charging case too. It charges automatically the units and it automatically syncs the units when you open the thing. The DJI transmitters are a bit smaller than the Rode Go's. Let me grab the receiver too. The receiver as well, and it has the magnetic storage. The receiver, the transmitter does have a micro lavalier input on it. The receiver is great, and that it has headphones and line out as well, and is a teeny tiny. It charges from within that battery case that I showed you when I took it out of. The transmitters, as Mitch pointed out, if you're going to plug an external lavalier into this, and I have tried it with the external lavalier, and it does sound good. The microphone's actually built-in microphone sounds pretty good too. If you are going to put a separate lavalier in it, make sure that the transmitter is on the same side of the body as your receiver is. You could either put the receiver behind the person if you're going to put it on their back, or just hide it in a front pocket somewhere so that you're not blocking the signal, because all 2.4 wireless microphones are line of sight, and if it's behind a big body, it's going to have trouble getting through.
Alex.
Yeah, I have the Rode Go and a couple other ones. I think that I would probably, if I was buying them today, that I got to use the DJI version of this, and I felt like the fit and finish was much more advanced than the Rode Go. So I think that it's just the next generation. Hopefully, Rode will hop over them for the next one, and then we'll keep the process going.
Let's go to David Paskin.
I forgot to mention one thing. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. So this is the Rode Go 2 that I'm using, but you had also asked about the lav. I'm not a big lav fan, but I got, where is it? It's over here. I got one of these cheap headset mics that kind of looks like a Countryman, but I didn't pay for the Countryman. I don't know. I mean, you can tell me what the audio quality is. I'm sure it's not as good as my other mic, but this is really sleek. It's just a little 35 millimeter in to the Rode Go 2.
Intelligibility is really good. I mean, I'm sure it doesn't have the entire frequency spectrum of a Countryman, but it doesn't sound bad for this kind of use at all. Courtney, you had a last thought?
I forgot to mention also in that little case are these two little adapters. This is for Lightning, and there's another one for USB 3 or USB-C, and it replaces the clip on the bottom of the receiver, and it lets you. So then, when you have it mounted, it sticks out like that, and it'll plug right into the bottom of your phone or anything with USB-C and become directly connected to the USB-C or the USB input of any device that you plug it into. And these are included in the package of the DJI.
Okay, let's move on to the next question.
Alec Lopez Waterman, Los Angeles, California, asking, I have for many years thought that about generative and derivative art. If you walk down the street or through a museum, it's very hard to find the difference. Does generative art even exist?
Moving back to philosophy. Chris Fenwick, what do you think?
This is absolutely the problem with the AI thing. So, in a world filled with beige PCs, a teardropped computer that's Bondi blue sticks out. Because if somebody typed into Chat GPT or whatever, show me a personal computer, and they did it in 1999 or whatever year that was, no iteration of artificial intelligence would have come up with a teardrop-shaped computer that was Bondi blue. Because that's not derivative, it's generative. So if you care about art, you probably want to see the thing that gets invented. I'm sorry, is the Bondi blue too obscure a reference? Maybe not in this room. I don't know.
It was those teardrop-shaped iMacs that first came out that were colorful.
Because no computer ever looked like that. Nobody ever thought to make a blue translucent computer where I can see the back of the CRT in there. Like, why would you do that? Because it's daring and it steps out. So I think the art, Tlaloc, that impresses us the most, because we're humans, is the stuff that stands out. And if everything is generative, everything will just be a beige computer box. And so I think we're going to be impacted more so by the thing that's different, right? If every Dick Wolf TV show sounds exactly the same, and then Aaron Sorkin writes something that's been casualized, to borrow a term that we talked about before the show, it stands out. And I think that's why generative, I'm trying to use your words, something that is created fresh is much more impactful than something that's just derivative of everything else that's ever been there.
Alex.
I think to Tlaloc's point, I will say that almost everything is derivative of some version, because every person that comes up with that design looked at a bunch of things that they were interested in, and they derived a new thought based on the old thoughts. Like we're always basing everything on whatever was in the past. Now that may radically change. When photography happened, suddenly, there was a huge business of doing people's portraits that went out the door really, really fast. Not fast, but over a couple decades, it went from being something that a lot of artists did as just kind of a thing to do. Now, what that sprung was the Impressionists and the all kinds of other, all the art that we saw after that had to change. It had to do it. Now, even then, when you look at something that is completely unique, it was still based on that artist's experience, and something that was, it didn't come from a void. It came from their, everything else they had seen. And I will say that with generative art, however we want to call it, it's derivative, but it's kind of like talking to someone who's, on LSD half the time, and they're, which is, you're sitting there asking for something. Like I was trying to get a caveman's club, talking about how crude something is for a presentation. And so I asked for a club, and I got, a club over a white background. No, and I was like, no, a caveman's club. So then it gave me a caveman at the club. Anyway, and so, and these are all like, I had to figure out how to be more specific. There was something so hilarious about getting a bunch of photos of cavemen at a club, and clubbing, Anyway, so anyway, the thing is that this is not something. It didn't go copy and paste cavemen at a club like this. These pictures it came up with, on its own. And so anyway, I think that what I find really great about because I use Midjourney all the time, and I use ChatGPT all the time, is not so much that I do use the photos. To make they make my presentation so much more fun. Like it's not that I don't use it to try to make technical things, but I use it to make my presentation look prettier and more fun. But I will say that I make a lot of stuff that I've never seen before, and a lot of times by accident. And I'm always amazed at what comes out of it. But I think it's very creative. A lot of times when I'm designing things, I ask Midjourney, and I'll generate hundreds of photos of something I'm designing. I won't use any of them, but they give me ideas. Like to what and I start thinking about things that I could use there.
Courtney, real quick.
Yeah, and I used to have a poster in the bathroom of my office called Proverb Idioms, and unfortunately, I looked for it. This is the only copy I could find. Unfortunately, it was low resolution, and it's a pictorial description of proverbs like "throw the baby out with the bathwater," etc., and they're all depicted in this image. And you have to sit there and figure out what all these people are doing and what proverb they. So that's kind of a recombination of artwork, and it's done in a certain art style that you'd recognize.
Interesting. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we still have time for some question adding. So this is the time for that, and please be sure to vote on the questions. Your votes determine what we're going to get to before we finish up at the top of the hour and bring in the LumaTouch folks. So next question.
Next one from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. Andy asks, here come the video AIs. Thoughts on a roll, not live, but...
And he references a newsshooter.com article. John Preto, start us off.
I downloaded this app prior to the show and was playing with it. It looks like they started this thing off to be a remote production tool. And then in the middle of that, AI took off like a rocket ship, and they added AI into their description of their product so that more people would download it. So when I think AI and video, I think generative video art like runway.ml or what's the other one we'd play with, Chris? D-ID is another one that's generative video. This one allows you to connect your phone to your desktop and record a remote session and then have it go up, and then they're doing, automatic focus and automatic tracking, those kinds of things. I'm still playing with it, but that's what I found so far.
Courtney, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was confused. I looked at the video and I wasn't really sure what they were doing and whether it uses Zoom or not, or whether it uses its own connectivity to connect up the different remote people. But yeah, basically it's like a digital Zoom. It gives you a wide shot and a close up, and it cuts between the two. AI, probably not. It's probably just algorithmic.
David Paskin.
Yeah, if you're a creator and you're living on your iPhone, it may be something cool to look at. It seems to me that some of the pan tilt zoom kind of stuff that they can do is kind of nice, that it'll do it automatically. So it'll pay attention to when someone's speaking. It'll zoom in on them. It's got bokeh and HDR. I think it looks interesting. You can also set different areas. It also has that sort of descript text-based editing feature that lots of people are using now. So it has that rolled in here. It looks like an interesting tool. If you're using anything higher than an iPhone, though, it's not for you.
Let's go to the next question.
From Douglas Carmichael asking, what small home office Wi-Fi router would the panel recommend that would support a command line configuration interface? I've heard good things about the Synology RT6600ax.
Alex.
I believe the Ubiquiti line will do that, or some of the Ubiquiti routers will allow you to have command line access to do those controls. I'm not as familiar with the Synology solution.
All right, let's go to the next question.
Mike Edwards from Brooklyn, New York asking, morning, everyone. For production, does the panel prefer to use the Xtouch or for iPad to control the X32 or the Xtouch MIDI controllers to control the X32?
Alex, help us out.
Yeah, I think that it's really nice to have a. We haven't used the iPad one that much. We've mostly used the Xtouch hardware. So there's a couple different sizes of those Xtouch hardware solutions, and while more expensive, really being able to grab onto something. We just did another setup with an X32, and going into some software or screens is really like you just want a slider to go up and down. So I think that having physical sliders to have some of that control is useful.
Let's move to the next question.
Vincent Alvarez from Bellingham, Washington asks, other than testing, why and when would you use the headset port at the bottom of a Shure MV7 microphone? I was planning to use the headset port on the PC tower. We will be using it for meetings over Zoom using a USB path, not the XLR.
Chris Fenwick.
Latency. It's all about latency. By plugging your headphone into that, the Caveman Club. Sorry, Alex. By plugging your headphone into the jack on the bottom, because that was so out of the blue, Alex accidentally put up his Caveman Club picture again. By plugging your headphone into the bottom of the mic, you're hearing that microphone with essentially, I'm going to call it zero latency. If you plug in someplace else, there may be latency to the point where you're hearing yourself at an ever so slight delay, which basically drops your IQ by about 25% and makes it impossible to present. That's why you want to use that jack.
Mitch, thoughts?
Yeah, it definitely is latency. Chris has nailed that on the top. But a lot of different circumstances will require no latency. If you're singing, using a mic to sing with, and you're matching up to something else, you need that. A lot of those special preamp devices also have the ability to monitor on a headphone jack or from the computer. Using the headset jack on a tower, generally I stay away from that.
All right. Courtney has a thought. Courtney?
Yeah, well, Chris nailed it, is latency. The thing you got to watch out for is whether or not the USB return comes back to that headphone jack on the MV7. If that's the only way you're going to be monitoring and you're in a Zoom meeting, you're going to need to hear the audio output from the other people in your headphones. So whether it mixes that or not with your low latency analog connection, and I'm sure Chris will let us know whether it does. It could cause problems if you don't have mix minus coming back to you. Then you'll hear it doubled because you'll hear the latency version and the non-latent version.
Chris, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, it's super interesting, and it can be very confusing if you're not used to it. A lot of audio devices, when you attach them, MV7 is one of them, and a lot of audio devices. I was looking for an example, and I'm realizing it's somewhere else. Will show up as both a microphone and a speaker in the Zoom control panel. And that's because it is both a microphone and a sound destination. So the Shure MV7 is going to show up as a speaker. So if you're going to use it for Zoom, on the Zoom audio settings, set the Shure microphone as the speaker, which makes no sense, right? It makes sense to set it as the speaker. The microphone, but it feels weird saying. And that way the sound from the Zoom meeting will go back to that jack. Now, I apologize, I'm not 100% certain, but there's probably some sort of a balance knob that'll allow you to balance how much of yourself versus how much of the computer that you're hearing. I could be wrong about that, and I apologize if I am. Maybe it's in software.
All right, let's move on to the next question.
Abraham Barrera in Georgia. So, last week you convinced me to buy a Mac Mini Pro for traveling. Any suggestions for traveling cases for the Mac Mini?
Congratulations on the new hardware, Abraham. We do that to people. David Paskin's going to start us out.
Yeah, sure. There's a nice case on Amazon. Kind of looks like a small briefcase, maybe made out of EVA. Inside, it's got room for your Mini. It's got room for your mouse, charger, if you got one of those little keyboards and stuff like that. It looks pretty nice. If you just want something just for the Mac Mini itself, there are also those up there. And most of these are next day delivery, which is nice.
Chris Fenwick.
Any excuse to buy a Pelican 1510 or the Air version of it, I use it. You're going to take some accessories, and you can also put a couple of socks in it. So take a 1510, you can roll it to the airport.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, and I actually have a slightly larger version of what David was showing. This is the RL Soco. This is for the studio, and this is what I use when I move my studio around, and it's exactly what David was talking about here. So I can have the studio here. Usually I usually put my web camera here, so I have the I'll have an Insta360 link in here. Then there's still more room up here for power cables and so on and so forth. So love it. Like I realized I was kind of putting my Mac Studio into my backpack, and it was getting a little dinged up with other things. And so I bought this for, I don't know, $30 or $40, and it's been a great investment.
Let's move to the next question.
Steve Kinsey in Lancaster, California. Rumors abound that LVS has sold or is in the process of divesting from AVID. Thoughts? Who would you like to see acquire AVID and Pro Tools, or is it time to let it die?
Let's go to Mitchell Hill.
Well, these big companies, they buy and sell products all the time. I wouldn't read too much into it. AVID has a very, very robust user base, especially in the film industry. It's not going anywhere. And even more so, Pro Tools is the standard. So if I were to buy them, I would split them up. But that's just me. So I think you're going to find that AVID's going to be around for a very, very long time, in spite of all the other things that are going on. Because you don't hear from them doesn't mean they're not innovating and doing other things. They're all about speed and convenience for their particular vertical market.
Alex.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good business for somebody. It's just that they don't see any real growth in that business. So that's the issue that they have, is that there was a massive growth over the last 5 to 10 years because of streaming, and now streaming is going to be, we're through the other side of the golden age of streaming, and so things are going to get a little bit more constrained from a production perspective, and so. I think that they're looking at there's just not that much growth left there. They're not really acquiring new. No one that I know that's new is getting into AVID. Some people are still. I mean, obviously, schools are still teaching Pro Tools, and Pro Tools is still I think even more of a standard than AVID is when it comes to a lot of different platforms. And so I think that Pro Tools is probably a more stable investment than AVID is itself, because I don't see how AVID's market grows significantly, especially in competition with Premiere, Resolve, and Final Cut. So it definitely is embedded, though. I mean, the people who use it aren't going to use anything else.
Courtney.
Yeah, I agree. It hasn't turned a profit recently. The profits have been going down, and these big hedge fund companies that own all of these products now, LVS is kind of a investment group that owns it. A lot of the major names have been bought out by investment groups over the years. They used to be, owned by single entities or individuals, but they are now moving into, whether it's making money or not, do we keep this as part of our portfolio or do we unload it to somebody else? And that's what's going on here. AVID for years had made a living off of selling hardware, turnkey solutions with hardware and software together. And now they're moving more to web cloud-based solutions for doing I/O and storage in the cloud and managing your assets for you. So that's why they're firmly entrenched in that area. So I think they will go on. ProTools is, I agree with Mitch, should probably be split off to a separate corporate entity and carried on with somebody else who cares about it, who wants to support.
Let's move on to the next question.
Adrian Watkins from Wellington, New Zealand, has a question. Upgrading the Zoom studio mic with shipping the Stella X2 is the same cost as a Rode NT1 G5. Which would the panel go for?
Alex, help us out.
I'm pretty happy with the Stella X2. So I think that I both Courtney and I both use it, and I think that it's for the price. I think it's a pretty darn good mic. I'd probably pick it over the Rode. I think I tested the Rode in the not too distant past, and it was good. There's nothing wrong with it. It just wasn't. I don't think it at least for my voice, didn't sound as good as the Stellar.
And Courtney, did you have a thought?
I concur.
Okay, that's pretty simple and distinct. Let's move to the next question.
From Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California, asking, how far does one need to go in Dante training to be good enough to implement it?
Mitch, start us off.
I didn't read any of it or do any of the training because I called on Mickey, and Mickey squared it away for me.
There you go. So phone a friend is one solution. Alex, if someone doesn't have a friend.
Well, we Mickey's in the after hours. You just have to decide when you're going to talk to about it. No, you should definitely take at least level 1. But all 3 levels are available over the web for free in the webinar, and you should definitely. I would recommend 1 and 2 definitely, if not all 3 of them. And again, they're coming up in August, and a bunch of us are threatening to take some time off to take them all together. I took them a long time ago. I don't remember any of it. So anyway, I think that we're looking at taking them together. So it should be so stay tuned for that. But take a look at their schedule. But August 1, I think, is when the level 1 training starts over a webinar.
I think that would shake them to their core if we office hour posse into
like 50 people who all know each other suddenly show up. Yeah, exactly.
Let's move on to the next question.
Jack Rupel from Breckenridge, Colorado, asking, Alex mentioned grading teachers' papers with AI. What would you think of peer review research papers judged in a way that highlights implicit bias, industrial bias, old concepts, invalid concepts?
Alex?
I don't think that AI is necessarily good at that yet. And I'm not saying that it won't be at some point, but it definitely could. And I was talking about grading the students' papers, not grading the teachers' papers. But I don't think that. I think that that you would probably have a hard time doing that well. We wouldn't know if it was actually accurate as it tries to grade those things. But I do think that it can, for instance, give you a whole bunch of extra information. Here's a whole bunch of other things that you could look at. Here's a whole bunch of other pieces. One of the things that I thought was really powerful is I've worked with a couple of partners that are not using generative AI in the way that it's looking at the whole internet. They gave it a specific set of sources, so 50 books or 80 books within something, and let you ask questions, and it gives you back real world answers, but it also gives you all the reference that it used to build that real world answer. That, for me, has been far more powerful than having it randomly come up with stuff that might be accurate or not, because I'm able to get an answer, but then I'm able to check through that answer. And I think that there's a future there that's probably more interesting than some of the stuff we're looking at right now.
Very nice. That takes us essentially. Oh no, we have one more question. I thought we were at the end of that. Let's move to Paul Wallace's question really quickly.
And last one for the first hour, Paul Wallace from Austin, Texas, asking, comment on MasterHub. It builds on Stream Deck's grid of programmable hotkeys with integrated LCDs on each key. The MasterHub claims to do this several times better. Does it have an app ecosystem?
David, can you give us 45 seconds on this?
I'll give you 30 seconds. I just had it up, but the question disappeared, so I took it down, so I can't show you pictures. It actually looks quite interesting. They're essentially building 3 different models, a streamer model, I think a podcast model, an editor model. They're modular, so they're different components, and you can mix and match and put them all together. it's going to be a combination of push buttons and LCD screens and knobs and twisties, turnies, things like that. I think it could be really interesting. It's really going to come down to, how good are those button presses? Stream Deck is pretty, I don't have a lot of problems with my Stream Deck. How good are those button presses? What are the different integrations and the UX as far as building that out? And the last thing I'll say is, because we were talking about Rode earlier, the one thing, there are probably many things, but the one thing that I don't understand why Rode did is all of their pads on the new Streamer X and the Rodecaster Pro, none of them have LCD screens built in. They're just colors. And so I have no idea what I'm pressing when I press one of those buttons. And if they had just put LCD screens in there, that would have made me a happy camper.
Very nice. It is the top of the hour, which means it's time for our second hour. And we are so excited to have back with us our dear friends, Chris Demiris and Terri Morgan of LumaTouch. How are you guys? It's been a while since we've seen you.
It's great.
I will. Thank you.
Go ahead, Terri. Yeah.
And we are excited. You are here in part to talk about Multicam, but what else is going on? Let's just start. How have things been flowing along at LumaTouch?
Go for it, Chris.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, things are going well. We have released Multicam. That was a long stretch to get that done, but we're really excited by it. And we've done something I think very unique that is a little different and something new, like we always do with our app, something that, changes the narrative on how to do things and makes it really editor and storyteller focused. And we have lots of new things we're working on now that we've gotten that big, Multicam really is an app within an app. It's such a complete different workflow that, we had to go back and spend a lot of time to make it work, but now we're working on more compartmentalized features. I'm sort of happy to be back to that, things that, people have been asking for a long time that I think they'll be very excited about. And so we're looking forward to this year with a lot of new features coming up.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your design goals and going into this? What were you looking to accomplish with the product?
Yeah, I can talk about that. I wanted to, so I've been doing Multicam since I started editing in the 80s. And I have always felt that it was my least favorite thing to do when I was editing. It just is always a little bit like, now I've got to I don't know, it seemed like you have to relearn it every time. Every system is a little bit, has a little bit of tricks in it. And I just felt like it could really be done in a way now with touch and just in a way that would make me feel really happy when I was doing Multicam. So I think what we were able to accomplish is making it friendly in a way that you just put your clips in and you're tapping away to cut. And you don't have to really worry about all the little tricks like, first you have to do these and sync these or put them in it's a super easy, super fun. And so I think what it'll do is hopefully make it so more people feel comfortable doing Multicam. So just throwing a few cameras together, doing something quick and cutting it real quick. So I think it's going to be really great.
And I, like many people, have been kind of gobsmacked by how good my iPhone cameras are. I'm just constantly amazed because I've been shooting for 40 years on and off, starting back in the days of shoulder-mounted cameras, and to see how far this technology in your pocket has come and able to in the ability to grab really beautiful-looking videos, and then now we need to do something with them to edit them and to work into these circumstances. Talk to me about the tools that we have to keep that quality going and why this is compelling for people who want to create multicam content easily.
Yeah, we've obviously seen huge changes even in the last few years with the cameras, with ProRes capture, with, better lenses. And I think we'll continue to see that moving forward. We've had one of our content creator in-house, Caroline Scott, went down to South Africa to do training that she was doing, and she set up, four iPhone cameras, a couple of GoPros, and did a multicam shoot right on the spot, and edited it right there. Just amazing what you can do. And the quality you can't tell apart from any other production that's been done. And I think it has democratized editing in a way that was never before possible, that you cannot tell it was done with an iPhone versus, a big camera in many cases, and that's huge. And so the technical limitations we're getting rid of very quickly. With LumaFusion, we have we've spent a lot of time on that, where you can take a drive out of a Blackmagic, a USB drive out of a Blackmagic camera, hook it up to your iPad, and edit directly off of that. We even at NAB we were doing a demonstration off of a OWC hub where we had 3 drives running all at once and editing off all 3 drives without ever having to bring media into the iPad. And it's a real game changer. And so those technical abilities that we've put in underneath the hood help drive, the easy and fun workflow that, that Terri designed. And it just creates sort of I think a magical experience.
And I would imagine that the hardware available, the fact that there's M-series chips in the new iPads and things like that, is that driving what you're doing? And how much pressure does that put on your development effort to always write for these fabulous new tools?
Well, it's one of the things I've always joked about is that, we don't have to do a lot of work when we get those. We just have to stay out of Apple's way because they do a lot of the optimization, and so at each step of the way, when we get a new, when we got the M2 processor, so like, all right, let's see how many tracks we can push it with. And, we did, again, at NAB, we were showing 16 tracks of 4K video playing back, and it was playing back smoothly, so, we just have to be careful about our development, but we let Apple do their amazing optimization and just take advantage of that at each step of the way. And that's worked for us very well.
But it is interesting, though, that the, Final Cut is and DaVinci Resolve for iPad are both only on the higher end devices, whereas LumaFusion is running on all sorts of phones and iPad Air. And
yeah, we find that the performance, even, I have to always make myself go back and work. I just sit here with an iPad 9th generation to test with to make sure that it will run well on there. And it's still amazing to me that even 6 tracks of 4K video on it will run smoothly on that iPad. So we've always had that ability there. And yeah, it's one of the fun things is that we've, got it available on all these devices, and it runs well on all these devices, and it degrades gracefully even on the old devices. So that's always fun for us.
Okay, well, talking about it is fun, but I understand there may be a demo in our future to see how it runs. Is that possible?
Yeah, I do have it here, and I'll just do a casual demo. So if you have questions, you can just stop and ask.
Way cool. Thank you.
As I go. So I'll share my screen, share sound, and share. There we are. Okay, should be coming any second. There we are. Okay, so here I have an empty timeline, and I'm just going to add a multicam container to the timeline from the menu. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So when you have a multicam container, there's this button here that just says synchronize, and now I get my synchronizer. I'm going to I could add 6 clips, and I'll just add 6 ones from this shoot. This happens to be a 12 camera iPhone shoot that we did. And so I've put the cameras into the 6 drop zones. They're not synchronized yet. And I'm going to go get my primary audio. Primary audio for us is, the desk audio that you had when you shot your multicam, that the musicians in this case were synchronizing to. And down here, you see press to sync. We can sync automatically, and that will choose the best by audio or time code, or choose only audio or only time code, or you can sync manually if you have a clip that doesn't have audio on it or doesn't have time code. So I'll just do automatic. And now you can see my clips are synchronized. I can tap on each one. I'm going to play it. Hopefully this isn't too loud. Dream chasing on it running. I know. Craziest kid in the world far as I know. I got goals from here to Colorado. So I'm not switching now. I'm just checking my sync. And when that's all good, I say, yes, I'm good to go. So I'm going to show you another example where I want to map some audio. But here now I'm in my switcher, and I'm just going to go back to the beginning. And here's the cameras that as they're coming online, and I can just tap. And in this case, it makes it really fun to switch because I can kind of do it very naturally. Now, say I was done switching, I can go to a cut point and I can just move that cut point if I want. Or I could jump to a cut and say, well, actually, I want to switch to a different camera. And you see it's all color coded. So I can tell that I'm on camera 2. And if I thought, well, I want to actually be on camera 4, I can just tap. It's going to cut till the very next cut point. So it's super easy. You can see my main audio down at the bottom, my primary audio down at the bottom. And when I close the switcher, I'm going to get this timeline clip. So some of the interesting things about this clip is I can tap once and pick it up and move it like a normal clip, or I can tap a second time and get right into a clip, in which case I can double tap and go into the effects editors just for that one clip. See, I'm just going to put a wild effect on here so you can see it really easily. Well, let's see what we got. Okay, I'm just going to do something that's really obvious. So now that's just on that one clip. But if I wanted to say I didn't like the color for this whole piano, I could go in here and double tap back in the synchronizer, and this is going to do the entire clip. So let's just turn that one. Let's go black and white saturation. Okay, so back on the timeline, every time I cut to the piano, which I guess I didn't cut to again, so I'll go back to the switcher. Okay, now every time I cut to the piano is black and white. So we have both local and then in here, I can use this clip as a normal clip in my timeline, do anything I want to it. I can even decide that I want to break it apart and put any other clips in between. So now I've created 2 just by saying, well, actually, I want to trim and put some other clips in between there. That makes sense? So let's see what else. Oh, so that's like a music video. But if you wanted to do something more like a
so that'd be useful if you want to do like commentary on what they were playing or something like that. You can split the whole timeline, even though, and then everything remains in state, kind of magnetically, like Final Cut works.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, I can just take a clip and slip it in there, and then I've got anything I want. And you also have your other 5 tracks and your other audio tracks as well.
Makes sense.
Another thing, I mean, one of the things I like about one thing that stopped us when we were developing and designing was that we realized how important audio is. It's not just syncing to a primary track. There's all sorts of stuff you want to do with audio. So I'm going to create another multicam clip here in a different way. I'm going to use this shoot from a cooking show, and I'll go into the synchronizer. And in this case, I have different audio sources I have, and I'm going to put my audio only down here instead of putting it in the main track, because what I want to do is say I don't really like the audio from camera 1. I think let me go listen to that one.
Couple more pieces of garnish, both for.
Yeah, that's really low. So I'm going to map 1 to 4. So now 1 is going to be playing camera 4. And I'll actually map, let's just say I map 2 to 3. So now you can see with the colors that every time I cut to 1, I'm going to get 1's video and 4's and the audio from 4. So I'm going to sync these up.
So the thing this really allows you to do is set up your audio ahead of time so you don't have to think about it when you're switching. With most with most multicam environments, you have to say, okay, at this point I need to turn off audio switching, or I need to do this. And we've made it so that you can just set this up one time, but based on the quality of your audio, and not have to think about it. Now, if you need to in the switcher, you can still do those other changes as well. But we've given you another way to set up things easily.
So I'm going to go back and go to the switcher in this case. Now, as I switch this,
add a lot of heat.
you would hear,
Seeds out.
let's see, there's not a lot of audio right now, but
So well
oh, that's a bad cut. So no big deal because I can go back and switch it. But you can
So basically,
see,
you can eliminate having to deal with scratch track audio or bad audio because it was in a cage or something like that and it couldn't hear well.
Right.
You just don't have to think about that after you set this initial audio targeting up.
yeah, when you're syncing, you do all of your, you could do most of your color correction, right? Unless the camera changes during the shot. You can do all of your audio levels, audio corrections, audio mapping. And then but that's the beauty of it, because once you get to the switching part, you're really just watching your media and responding to that in a really natural way. And you're not worrying about things. We do have the ability to say, oh, I actually here, I only want to cut audio. So I just turn that off and you can now switch and just cut audio, but, or just cut video. But I think that's not that's something you can do, but it's not a normal everyday thing when you've already set up all your audio. You don't have to deal with that right at the time.
Clearly you've thought about the mental flow for the editor to make it as transparent as possible so that when you're cutting, you just concentrate on the rhythm and the flow of what you're cutting and not have to worry about all this background detail stuff.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes it so fun, is you're just really in the moment. It's like you're actually on the shoot, just saying, oh, I see that over there and I see that and I want to see that now. And you're not worried about the technology. And I think that's what I always felt about multicam, is that I couldn't quite get into the zone. I was always like, am I doing this right? And is everything set up right? And, oh, I have to stop and now turn off video or audio and do that cut. And now, it wasn't creative. And now, I feel like it really is a creative act that anyone can do. Like anyone who sets up 2 or more cameras is just able to stick those in there, press sync, press switch, and go. So
I know some of our panelists had questions. Do you have another thing you want to talk about very quickly, or do you want to go to?
No, that's fine. I will stop sharing and take
Alex, you had some questions.
No, it looks fantastic. I mean, now what's the process of getting those files in? Is it something that you do you put it up in photos? Do you transfer it external drive? Like exactly what's the easiest way to get the files in that we shot from the cameras?
Well, obviously, it depends on how you shot. Have you shot it on a traditional camera, or have you shot it on an iPhone? One of the things that we did at NAB was, as Chris mentioned, we put our media onto external drives. So we had 3 external drives hooked up through the OWC Go Dock. And
so you had the Go Dock connected to the USB-C of the iPad. And then you had 3 hard drives connected to that.
And we could just cut from those. So that was great. We didn't actually, it was kind of funny because I told Chris that we tested it out and it was going to work. And he said, no, I don't think it's going to work. And I said, no, it does. And he tried it. He's like, what? So it really, it was funny. And so you can do it that way. I personally, I find if you're shooting on iPhones, the easiest thing to do is have an Apple ID for work only, that you just put your project's media in. So I set up on my shooting phones, I have my nicer iPhones with good lenses to that Apple ID. And therefore I never have to transfer anything. It just shows up on my iPad. And that's, obviously using what was meant for maybe consumer consumption for a different purpose, but it's the easiest thing to do for sure.
Yeah. The nice thing is, to make sure people understand, is you can use all those methods all at once. You can get your media from multiple places. You could have some of your media from a drive, some of your media from photos. LumaFusion doesn't care about that, in the sense that it will do the right thing with the media, wherever you get it from. And so you can have multiple sources. If you have some stuff from Dropbox or Frame.io from other, from other people for the project, just bring it in, drag it. It's almost always just a drag and drop, and we'll do the right thing for you with it.
Frame.io is integrated, so you just log into your Frame.io and you can see any media on there, and then we grab it when you drag it to the timeline.
Yeah, and we also have a similar integration with the new Dropbox Replay, which is another similar type of review and approval tool.
Yeah.
Alex, do you have anything else, or do we?
The only question I have is, so if someone's going a bit guerrilla and they want to they don't have time code, but they want to put it on one of the left channel, is that something they can use to sync the clips up as well? And they might have the regular audio on one channel and the time code on another.
Yes.
LTC. I mean, I think.
Yeah.
I think isn't that what Andrew's working on? Is the
yeah,
LTC?
yeah. We don't currently have LTC time code support in there, but that will be coming in a future update. So we do normal time code and that, but yeah, that is coming.
That's great.
Mitch, you had some questions?
Yeah, Terry and Chris, thanks for being here. And that's a great piece of software. As a traditional editor, I'll say my biggest fear when I get a timeline I put a lot of time into, and I get near the end, and then I find, somehow I lost sync with the soundtrack earlier on. How do you protect sync down the line, or do a resync if you find that you've gone and messed something up with some kind of ripple edit or a slip somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, so I think having, I like I said, I've been editing since the 80s, and I think that our timeline model is the most flexible and easy to use than anything I've used in the past, AVID, Final Cut, Premiere, because what we've done is combined a magnetic timeline with a linear, like a track-based timeline. So the way we work it is the main track is either an insert or overwrite. So you can always make that choice. Like I can say, I don't want to touch anything right now. I just want to be really safe and go into overwrite and overwrite a clip. You can also replace a clip, or you can work in insert mode. Like I am always in insert mode, and everything then is magnetic to that main track. So the clips hang off of it that are, they're linked like in Final Cut. But because we have the combined track-based model, you can unlink a clip if you like or a group of clips to not make them move. And you can also lock whole tracks. Like if I have a soundtrack I've worked really hard at and I'm just going to cut to that, I would lock those tracks and then just work on the video. So there's a lot of options to keep you in sync.
Let me jump in on Multicam, specifically at any time you can go back into the synchronizer and either resync or adjust, or let's say down the line you have a problem, you could cut the clip and nudge, a clip a little far forward, and that'll, feed through to any of your edits that you have and keep things in sync.
Yeah, so. Sorry. I wasn't sure whether you were talking about Multicam or regular, but yeah, both are pretty easy.
Yeah. Cool. Courtney has a question.
I had a question in your multicam synchronizer. That all looks really slick, and it chooses in the automatic mode, will it choose time code or audio guide track to sync it up. Is very cool. One question I had is, where does the time code come from? If you have people shooting on different phones, where does the time base come from if you're not using an external LTC input into that phone? Does it just use the cellular system's time code base? And how do you deal with different frame rates if different phones can only, one phone will shoot 2997, the other shoots 30, and another one shoots 24? How do you deal with mixed frame rates in the synchronizer with perhaps an audio track recorded on an external audio recorder with its own time code base?
Yeah, I'll answer the first part of that, and then Chris can take the second part. The first part is like time code would normally come from if you're not shooting on an iPhone. So if you shot on any other professional camera that had time code. Chris, you take the frame rate.
Honestly, the different frame rates, could be an issue. And generally we found that, at the moment using audio for sync is probably your best option. But with the LTC time code coming up, I think there's going to be a lot more options, particularly tools like Tentacle Sync, where you can basically, jam in, LTC time code on iPhones and other devices. I think will make that more useful for iPhones. Honestly, that is an area where time code has a more limited use right now, and only in devices that actually provide actual time codes. So on the
the tracks that come, the video that comes from an iPhone, the time code is in the metadata at the head of the file. Is that where
that is? Yeah, and it's only going to be a sync at the head of the file, and so that can sometimes. We haven't generally found it to be too major of an issue, but we haven't done really, I haven't tested it with super long form things to see how much drift we get, with different frame rates out as we go out. But again, that's a place where right now you'd probably manually make some adjustments if you saw it happening down the road. The thing is, most iPhones capture at a slightly variable frame rate anyway, but generally, Apple's, AV Foundation and LumaFusion will pick the right frame to keep things in sync down the line, and does a nice time mapping to make sure that stays in sync based on the audio primarily.
I see. So even in a long clip, if you got a 30-minute clip or something where it could drift,
we
it'll
have
autocorrect as
clips.
it goes along based on the audio.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
So we have some questions coming in. Let's get to our first one. Mitch?
First one in from J.J. McKenna, Bill, in San Rafael, California. After watching a demo recently from Felipe Baez looking at a released iPad editor, could Fenwick comment on the differences between LumaFusion and a different type of tablet editor?
Chris Fenwick, you've been invoked.
Almost certainly not. Terri and Chris, I've always been impressed. Your software is elegant. I think that if I was going to describe it with one word, it's elegant. And I think you've done a great job at taking it. What's interesting about editorial and editing is everybody wants it to be simple. It's so easy, and it's not. It's difficult. You're bringing in sources from all kinds of places, and it's difficult. But you've persisted at keeping it elegant. I personally, I'm not a big fan of the iPad. I wish Apple didn't waste their time on it and just made my desktop computer better, but whatever. I get it. What I'm really curious about is, has it ratcheted up your urgency now that Apple has their iPad software? What's the mood like in the office? I'm curious.
Honestly, when they announced it, of course, you're like, oh boy, what's
here we go.
Yeah. But the day I sat down with it, I was honestly a little surprised by the fact that it didn't have a lot of things that I expected. Even for me, one of the biggest surprises was frankly performance, which I would have expected Apple to be better at. So I put together 2 timelines on an M1 iPad, both with just 6 tracks of 4K video playing back. LumaFusion played it back smoothly. Final Cut Pro started stuttering after about 5 seconds and never scrolled the timeline. And we're scrolling the timeline, we're playing back. So I was actually sort of surprised. And frankly, feature-wise, there's features. Now, given, Apple's very careful about what they release,
1.0, sure.
Yeah, they're going to do a 1.0 and they're going to iterate. So, we obviously have our work cut out for us to, I hope, stay ahead of the game, but at the same time, we have a very different editor. So, and that became even more apparent when I used, Final Cut Pro, that we have a different approach to things. And I think that'll continue, and there'll be appeals for both tools for different people. And frankly, for the same person, they might use Final Cut for one thing and LumaFusion for another, and that's okay. What I was also, unfortunately, I was disappointed by is that Final Cut on iPad can't import FCP XML, and so because we export FCP XML for desktop editors who want to continue editing there, and so that's an unfortunate thing that we can't do that.
Chris, clarification: did you just say you export Final Cut XML,
yeah.
or can you import it as well?
No, we only export at this point, but
I think they're only doing that as well.
Yeah, they're not actually exporting FCP XML on the iPad. They have a custom format there. We've looked at that because we were hoping that might be a future workflow, but it's not. And
who is it? Somebody has posted that they have worked. It might be Chris Hawking, that has a hack of getting a Final Cut XML, not XML, but a Final Cut timeline, I'll call it.
Data export.
Into the Final Cut for the iPad, even though Apple doesn't officially support it.
Interesting.
I think one of the things that's important to remember about Apple's behavior, and we know this from watching Final Cut 10 for the last, 12 years, is Apple is okay with not doing something rather than doing it and not doing it really well. So if you look at like how long it took Final Cut 10 to get Multicam, it's like, come on, or paste attributes.
Yeah.
Why can't I paste attributes? But when it came out, you went, "Ooh, this is really awesome." You know, so that's a behavior that they're doing. And let's face it, what do you like? Got a 4-year jump on them, 5-year jump? How long have you been doing this?
6-year jump on them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely competition for us. And we, of course, we even look at it and go, oh, there's some things we like there that, we'll certainly, incorporate moving forward. And, and there was obviously things they looked at in LumaFusion that they incorporated. So it's part of the fun competition that makes both products better, I think.
I also love the fact, Chris, that you were surprised when Terri said, no, it's working. We can get it off of 3 drives.
Right.
Like there's a relationship between the like an opera, and I don't want to minimize what you're doing, Terri, but like sometimes an editor will go, I should be able to do that, and the engineers or the programmers like, no, not going to work, not going to what?
Well, yeah. That's
just
true.
Make it happen.
That's a big part of my role.
Sometimes you just got to push the envelope and break things and see what you can, force something to do.
Absolutely. And be persistent, because a lot of times I am quite an annoying partner to have because I'm like, I really, really want this. I want this to work.
But that's annoyance in the service to product improvement.
Two other real quick things, and this is something that I've always felt that all editors should do. I love what do you call the synchronizer? I love the fact that you have that. It's your multicam editor or whatever. I've always thought it'd be great if you could just lasso or shift click a bunch of clips that you've already stacked in a timeline and go, yeah, I made a mistake. I should have multicammed these. Send these to the synchronizer. I know that a lot. I don't do it now because I've been dealing with this long enough, but I know that a lot of green editors, and I don't mean people that are making videos about the environment, but young editors will accidentally, they'll start doing this and then they'll go, oh yeah, maybe I should do this multicam thing. Anyway, I
really like that feature. And you could, with the current version, I want to make that a feature exactly the way you've said it, but you could actually lasso select, say copy, start a new multicam container, and I believe you might be able to paste them in. I'll have to check that, but anyway, we'll get that on our feature request list.
I've always thought it, and I love the fact that you have the little just put the audio here. You don't have to take up one of your angles, and I would love to hear not right now, but Terri, I'd love to hear more about the having everything just from your cameras, your iPhones, automatically just go to the iCloud account, because I've been trying to wrap my head around that workflow. Anyway, I'll let Alex talk.
That sparked me. A separate account just for video. Alex, you had a question.
Yeah. So I just to build on what Chris was talking about. So when you're describing where LumaFusion fits into this, because I do think that it's a much more fluid solution on the iPad than anything else out there right now. But how do you when you're talking to people about distinguishing it from Resolve, and it's now on the iPad, and the Final Cut on the iPad, how do you talk about that? When you're talking about the 3 editors that now are there.
You want to take that, Terri? Or shall I?
Oh, should I take that?
Yeah.
So I guess
because I think it's easy. Like when people talk to me about it, I'm curious about what you say to it. I'm just like, well, LumaFusion's a lot more fluid. Like I've played with Resolve, I've played with Final Cut, and so far it still feels like there's one. So I guess how I would distinguish it is that right now they still both feel like Final Cut and Resolve feels like we took something from the desktop and put it on the iPad, as opposed to we built something for the iPad.
I guess that's one way of looking at it, is that they borrowed from the desktop, but I think it is that we have just spent a lot of our effort and time internalizing the process of editing and really examining how users are wanting to edit. So we have people coming in to do regular testing, at our office, so we can actually sit and watch them do it, and so usability tests. But I also think that Chris and I never started LumaTouch to make money and be in a big business. We started LumaTouch because we both love what we're doing. We love editing. I love editing so much. Like on the weekend, I felt so bad because I should have been doing something with my son. And I'm just like, well, I could just spend a few hours editing. I just love it. And so that, I think, comes through, because when something doesn't, it doesn't feel right, I actually get kind of irritated, and I'll text Chris and say, this is not good. This is bothering me. And it can be just a little tiny thing. But had I been working for a bigger company like Blackmagic or Apple, I don't know if I would have that like power. I wouldn't have that communication with the lead developer. I just wouldn't have the ability to do that. And having worked at AVID with Chris, I know that even when I knew something was wrong, it would be like, well, let's put it in the backlog and maybe we'll get to it next year. It's not as high priority as 5 other things. But to me, the experience is the priority. That right. I want to feel happy and creative when I'm editing. And I just don't think you're going to get that in a bigger company. That's the real problem, I think.
Mention one other thing. Oddly enough, some of the fluidity that you mentioned and just some of the workflow that makes storytelling fun in LumaFusion, frankly, comes from the fact that we started it in 2013 when there were a lot more limitations on the iPad. And frankly, that drove some of the decisions we made that to this day, I think, make the app better for it. For example, having the separate clip editor lets you focus on a single clip. That was done out of necessity at the time, because we couldn't have all the controls. We could have all the controls in the timeline now and do all that. But frankly, it's a nicer workflow to say, I'm going to focus on the effects and the audio adjustments and the color correction for this clip right now. And then get back out to my storytelling in the timeline. And I think that works. And I think it, so some things happen by necessity. Often in technology, that's what happens, and others were by design. So,
Yeah, and the iPad does force you. I mean, it did, like Chris said, force us not to use a bunch of menus to get to features. So every feature has to be present, understandable from a tiny icon and no words next to it, right? Because it's in all languages. So it's got to be real simple and understandable. And that was by necessity. So.
Before we get to our next question, I just wanted to touch base with you. What are the hardware requirements? People are out there with all sorts of iPads, and I know a lot of people who are interested in exploring this with the new Apple offering. You have to have an M2 or something, M1. There's very limited hardware considerations. You said you have a broader array of tools that you can work with this. What's your minimums?
LumaFusion will run on any iPad or iPhone that supports iOS 15.4 or later. So it's basically an iPad 9th generation. It might even be 8th. I think it's 9th. It's 8th generation and above. And I think an iPhone S or an iPhone 10 or above, if I remember right. It might even be slightly lower than that. So just about any modern device that's within about 4 or 5 years old. So we support
Excellent.
it. And you can do multicam on an iPhone too. It's a different experience, but works very well there too.
Now, that would be interesting. Does it get really, really small in terms of the interface?
Well, we make definite decisions there, of what to show and what not to show, but still have all the features there and make it a usable experience. And on the iPhone, you can. Another thing we've done a lot of is take advantage of the different, whether you're in portrait or landscape, and you can rearrange your layout of the UI depending on what you're doing at the time. And that gives you a lot of flexibility to work, in a small screen environment. So, of course, with my old
please
eyes,
don't tell me I need a jeweler's loop to edit.
Yeah,
going
there
forward.
you go. That's it. Well, that's when we do the watch version. You'll need that.
No, thank you. No, please.
I want the watch
Alex,
version.
you had another thought?
I want multicam on the watch. Like you can just sit there. Is he looking at what time it is, or is he putting the next music video? Just sitting there tapping away. So we're a weekend away from WWDC. Is there anything that as developers, is there anything that you're looking forward to or hoping to see next week?
Yeah, obviously it's going to be a very interesting WWDC with the rumors that are out there. But from my own standpoint, just seeing some of the things that are in Final Cut, I'm hoping we see a couple things that'll help improve LumaFusion. One, Final Cut has, audio scrubbing, when you're scrubbing. I hope they have that in the APIs. I hope we get access to the cinematic, mode tools. That's something we've been asking for, for some time. And they are able to reverse instantly without any rendering. And that I hope is available in the API. So from my standpoint, those are the three interesting. Anything else would be gravy. My gut feeling is the focus is going to be on very different things, so you never know. But, they have different teams there, and I hope that's what we see.
Are you guys thinking at all about any USDZ and integration, like being able to bring 3D models into your environment?
Yeah, we do have that on our feature request list. And, moving forward, some of the areas we're working on are improved, animation keyframing, and that could lead into that. It's not on the immediate horizon, but we'll definitely be looking into that as well.
Courtney.
Just to be clear, this the latest version of LumaFusion is available also on Android and Chrome operating system. Is it compatible across?
That is correct. Yeah, it's now not all the same feature set yet. We are working really hard to start. We decided to have a cutoff on Android because with such a wide environment there and different performance capabilities, it was a much bigger development task just to get it up and running, and we're still working on that. But we've actually got it up very close to our basic 3.2.3 version, and we're starting to work towards bringing up to full compatibility with the iOS side, and that we'll continue doing this year.
So the multicam feature, is that available yet on
It is not available
Android?
yet, and that may be a little ways down the road. That was one we really need to make some performance improvements on a wider range of Android devices to make that possible. But the main experience of LumaFusion on the Android is exactly what you'd expect, and it really works really well, especially on the higher end Galaxy tablets and things like that.
Okay, thanks.
Let's move to our next question.
From Adrian Watkins in Wellington, New Zealand. Super cool. Within Multicam, is there a way to help cut on the beat of a music audio track?
We don't have that feature right now, and that is something we've had on our feature request list for a while. And I don't know if, I don't know when we'll have that, but I appreciate the question. It's something that is important, we realize.
Is it at this point you just listen back and tap, tap, tap on the beat? Is that how you'd end up executing cuts?
And then you could roll trim to get it exactly on the beat very easily if you'd missed a beat.
Well, that's interesting. Sometimes you have something that's like a march and it's very clear where the tempo markers hit. And, even good editors sometimes, depending on the video content, want that cut to be a little ahead of or a little behind. And certainly jazz and music that's more freeform, sometimes there isn't a specific easy decision. Right. That's where the kick drum hits, so let me cut there. So it gets to be a creative choice. Chris Fenwick, you had a thought?
Yeah, years ago, like maybe even 20 years ago, I was talking with a friend of mine who's a music producer, and he started delving into video editing and taking my work, whatever. And he was... Not that I'm bitter. No. He's a good friend. I'm happy he's doing anything he's doing. He was shocked and felt that it was on the verge of barbaric that video editors didn't have beat detection. He's like, he says, Pro Tools has had this for a decade. And this was 20 years ago when he said that to me. And he said that it's ridiculous that video editors don't have beat detection. And it makes me think, and I don't normally get to sit and talk to, developers like this. It makes me think it would be really interesting for you to take a week off. I know you're busy, How hard can it be to make a multi-platform tablet-based video editing tool? Take a week off, go take a Pro Tools class and learn everything about beat detection. Right. Because I think that there's a real, still 20 years later, as far as I know, no video editing tool has beat detection like Pro Tools does. And when you have it, it's super cool. And I realize that, from an artistic standpoint, you don't always necessarily want something cut exactly on the beat. Right. But often you do. And if there was a snap to beat feature or something where it's just listening to the music and figure out how Pro Tools does it, I'm sure, whatever. It's a super interesting thing that's, to my knowledge, has never been addressed on a video editing tool.
Well, that is interesting. And the good thing I'll say is that we have a senior engineer here who is an audio expert. He worked at Mixed and Key. He's worked at other, places, and just that is his domain as an electrical engineer. So knows it from the true audio side, from that. And so, we have the people in house to do that. And, it's interesting to hear that.
It would be interesting to see, yes, we can reinvent it, but, the Pro Tools is the standard, right? And so figure out what they're doing, how they're doing it, talk to a few engineers and you'll see how they're doing, what they're doing with it, and then glean from that what, and Terri knows, what do we need as an editor? Yeah. Sometimes you want it right on the beat. Sometimes you want to push and pull and add tension and art and blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah.
And by the time you get that in there, you're going to have AI doing now Max Roachify it, or
there we go.
Give me a great drummer.
Yeah. Maybe this is, maybe I have to take responsibility for that lack of feature, because I don't typically cut on the beat. I would put the action on the beat. So whenever it comes up, I'm like, yeah, I would rather put the action on the beat, not the cut. But I think that, I'm glad you brought up AI, Bill, because, over the weekend I was editing something and I was doing some animating, hand-drawn animation over video to bring back in LumaFusion to put over my video. And I thought, wow, I'm guessing you can just do that with AI, and I could probably just go get it tooled. But I had so much fun just doing that myself that I had this great deep sense of sadness that, if everything goes AI, we will actually lose the total enjoyment you can get from building yourself. Like, I don't know, I imagine it like a puzzle, like a tabletop puzzle. How much enjoyment you get from just the relaxation of sitting there putting the puzzle pieces together. But if you bought a puzzle and you just snapped your fingers and it was all put together, it would be the worst puzzle in the world, right?
It's called a poster, by the
way. Well, yeah. And, AI might give you the Gene Krupa-ify this or Phil Collins-ify this, two different drummers approaches. But isn't the point to make it the you-ified? Right. That's what you're being hired for, is to bring something to the table that isn't like something that somebody else would do facing the same thing. Chris,
so imagine, Terri, if you could select a soundtrack and say, okay, do beat detection. And all it did was put markers on tempos. And now you could just put, like a marker on a door slam and just go pop,
right,
pop. Pop, pop, pop.
Yeah, I'm not against the feature in general. I agree. It could be useful. It's just that I think I haven't pushed for it.
Yeah. One more thing on AI. I think AI is going to have a lot of uses of reducing the tedious aspects of editing. And to do new things. For example, one of the first things we got in recently with 4.0. And this is actually Apple's work again, is their machine learning based voice isolation filter. And that's amazing, and more tools like that use AI in ways that will just reduce the work that you have to do and let you even do more of the enjoyment of storytelling and the creative parts of it. That's where we're headed as we bring more and more machine learning and AI into LumaFusion, is to try to make those just the tools easier to do what you want to do and reduce some of the more tedious aspects of it.
Well, and I think that there's a possibility of having AI be the assistant editor that does a lot of stuff for you. You just throw a bunch of stuff in, it tags a bunch of stuff for you, it figures that stuff out, and maybe even, for a lot of corporate stuff for education, it just does an assembly. Just assembles everything for you, into something that you now go into. I've worked with a couple artists, a sculptor in Africa, and he's got 30 people. He draws out what he wants. And then he's got 30 people that get it to about 90% done, and he comes over and dotes on each one of them going, oh, don't do that, or move this over here, or do whatever. But it's granite. And these are he's pounding on, the people are pounding on stuff. And so then what he does is he's guided that idea. And then he comes in and he finishes everything. He puts his touch on it and kind of tightens it all up. And he had his touch on it all the time. But I think that there's a possibility of it looking at how you like to edit, right? Look at all my stuff that I do, figure out what I like, and then assemble this to 90% finished or 85% finished in the ballpark that I want. And then I'm going to go in and give it the magic that makes it different. But I think that there's a way to kind of get, I mean, that's what stops me from editing a lot of times is like, oh, the setup. I'm like, you know, if I can get in there and it's all done, then, you know, like, and all I have to do is work on where it's cut. Not done, but like it's all in there and kind of in the right place. And all I have to do is melt it to what I want. I think I'd probably do more of it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there. And yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of changes over the next couple of years in that regard, for sure.
Let's go to the next question.
Carlos Rojas from Washington, D.C. asking, does the sync feature work with both Android and iOS video files?
Now, it only works on iOS at the moment, but it should work with Android video files. There shouldn't be any problem there. Now, we don't, iOS doesn't support the WebM video format at the moment, but anything else, an MP4 file that comes from Android, you know, will work just fine.
Yes, it does. I've tested that.
Yeah, we've done that for sure.
Cool. Let's go to the next question.
Chris Fenwick from Emeryville, California asking, can we discuss what you've learned about the iCloud workflow and strategies to take?
You mean as far as making a new Apple ID? I mean, the one thing, is that the question?
Oh, yeah. First of all, I just want to say great question. But you mentioned earlier that you created an iCloud account that all of your, I think your words were, you know, your higher end iPhones. I'm envisioning, Terri, that you have a road case someplace with a bunch of phones that you use specifically for video production. Nobody's texting their grandparents on it. Right. and they're dedicated to this. They're all logged onto the same iCloud account. Your edit system, suite, iPad, wherever that is, also logged onto it. So once I take a shot, a certain amount of time passes and boop, it pops up
on everybody's iPads. Yeah,
on everybody's iPad. So are there any? I think this is a workflow I've been wanting to experiment with. I didn't have the big deep LumaFusion pockets to go buy a bunch of spare iPhones to try it. But I'm curious. Does it work well? Are there any hiccups? Are there any problems that you've come across? And I realize this is not talking about your software, and I apologize.
No, I mean it is. It is in a sense. No, I think so. We have a number of studio iPhones that we use in the studio, but we also check them out to do shooting outside. And so when we weren't doing that, it was just like everybody was like, where is the media? How do I get that media you shot? And then we started doing that. It's just like now everybody just, if they're logged into the studio account, they just get the footage automatically. It solved like every problem that we were having. And LumaFusion, you just drag it to the timeline, then it will cache that onto your particular iPad. So if something were to happen to that iCloud version, you're still going to have it in the project that you were using it in until you delete your cache manually, right? So yeah, no, it's been great.
I tell you, it would be really awesome if, and maybe it does, I don't know. Does it? If a shot had geolocation data in it, does it?
It does, yeah.
And then you could sort by everything shot in Oregon.
Yes.
Boom, and now I have all, from that road trip that we did.
Yes, you can do that. And by the way, it also, since you're a desktop aficionado, it works on the Mac as well. So if you use LumaFusion on your Mac, then you can do that from photos there as well, as long as it's on the same ID.
Yeah, it's very cool. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's go to the next question.
And coming in from Los Angeles, California, is Gordon Lake. A couple wants their family and friends to provide all the wedding footage and cut it in LumaFusion. How would they set that up?
Ooh, interesting.
Ooh.
Yeah, with different people. I mean, my person, and I'll let Terri think of one as well. There's a lot of ways you could do it. I would personally use AirDrop. Have the iPad there and let people AirDrop to it. Might be the simplest way. You could also use the iCloud sharing. If you're doing that, the one thing I'd recommend, there's a setting in in photos, that's whether you use automatic or keep originals on when transferring data. If you use automatic, it can basically re-encode it and you might lose some quality. So, anybody who's doing that, I'd recommend to use keep originals. That's not usually an issue when you're going between devices with AirDrop, but it's something to watch out for.
No, I like the AirDrop idea, because what happens when you leave a wedding is people say they're going to, share their media and then they don't.
Yeah.
But if you just had an iPad there with a lot of storage and just said, hey, and then just say, hey, on your way out, let me grab your phone and AirDrop whatever you want to share with us. That would be really cool. I never thought of that.
And I will give one warning about that I just thought of. Apple made a change in iOS 16 to AirDrop, where it'll only accept from everyone for 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes, you might have to reset that. If you have it set for contacts, it'll do those forever. But if you want it to accept from anyone, it will only allow that for 10 minutes and then we'll reset. So it's a security.
It is super annoying.
But it's I
don't know why they did that.
Yeah. So something to watch out for.
People are getting spammed at the airport.
Yeah, that's right. That's it. Yeah.
Let's go to the next question.
And here's Chris Fenwick asking, what do you think of the theory that Apple is already using AI? It's what Steve Jobs used to call the magic.
Right.
You mentioned something just a moment ago, and it's like, there's our AI expert here, Preto. Sorry, there's trucks backing up outside. Is doing this talk about, all the tech companies and they're using it. But I think that there's a lot of things that my Apple products are already doing that are like, how did you do that? How did you know that? I think there's
absolutely. Yeah. Like at NAB, I forgot my passport when I went to check in at the desk. And one of my friends said, oh, just have you ever photographed your passport? And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know when that would be. So I just type in passport and it showed up. And then I was able to use that as my ID. So, but I think it's just, it's so in all sorts of media management stuff is for sure. But Chris, I'm sure, has other ideas there.
I mean, Apple is definitely using it in a number of places. Now, Apple is always, as usual, careful about it. It always has to be able to work on device. So, there's some limitations there. They're not going to go the Google route, Google I/O, where everything is now AI. It's just not going to be their domain. But, Apple does a great job of using it carefully and slowly building that, to the voice isolation filter is another example. They have a number of video filters that we plan on integrating with that do stylistic like oil painting style that are AI based to give a better result. And I think it'll just continually slowly build up. I think we'll see a significant amount from Apple about AI. They'll focus it more on machine learning, and it might be more about their augmented reality experiences. But they keep doing it. And one of the ones they mentioned just recently on accessibility is that voice learning feature, where it can basically, you can train to your voice and then actually use your voice to talk if you type something in. That's another area. So they pick and choose areas that they think have really interesting uses and are controllable uses as well. So, and I think that'll continue to be what Apple does moving forward.
Mitch Hill has a question.
So we're close to the point where I can say, edit this corporate video in the style of Walter Murch.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Now, I don't know if you've seen some of the AI generated videos, but it's got a little ways to go yet.
This has been really interesting because we've got a couple more questions. We're right close to the top of the hour, so let's go to the next one real quick.
JJ McKenna, San Rafael, California. Could you imagine integrating Midjourney into LumaFusion for adding sources to a timeline similar to your Frame IO integration?
Oh, absolutely. We've got that, we have the story blocks integration, which gives you access to an amazing range of, backgrounds, media, music, and other things. And I could see AI generated media being yet another source of media within, integrated in LumaFusion. And thanks for the idea on that. We'll get working on that right away.
Next question.
Mickey Makachor from Manila, Philippines, ask, does LumaFusion have the capability to ingest from camera media into multiple drives and verify the copies with a checksum? If not, perhaps a partner app may be in the future.
Yeah, we don't have that in there at the moment, but yeah, that's another one. It's not a workflow I'm overly familiar with, but it's certainly something we could do. Yeah, and one of the things we've done is integrated with partners. In the past, for example, our Video stabilization is from basically CoreMelt's lock and load integrated in LumaFusion. So we're very open to integrating with anybody and everybody. That's another advantage of being a small company and not, frankly, not being Apple, is that, we're very open to working with, the best providers in the industry to create the best tool. And so I that's certainly open to that.
Chris and Terri, it's always an absolute pleasure to have you there. It's been a fascinating hour. Thank you very much for walking us through the new products, the Multicam and LumaFusion. I imagine that a lot of people are going to want to check this out immediately. Alex, what's happening tomorrow? I was trying to get into the officehours.global site, and I'm having a little trouble with it.
We're making some changes to the officehours.global site right now. It should be so we're making we're moving some stuff there, so it's down for a moment as we finish all of that up. Just a little spring cleaning, but tomorrow we will be at Cinegear, and so tomorrow we're pretty excited about that process. Today tonight we're all getting together a little bit, and then tomorrow we'll be in after hours from noon till 6 or 7. We will be just covering Cinegear there. And then also on Saturday, we'll have from 11 to 3, we'll actually be broadcasting that. So you have that. And then in the morning for office hours, we've got Jonas Dottel and a slew of other folks talking about remote production. So how are they putting all this stuff together? Are they using the cloud, where they use hardware? How do they control the hardware? How they control the cloud? All those things. They're going to be there to talk about their workflows and answer your questions about that. So it's a busy couple days.
Absolutely. So the final thing always is to thank you, everybody. Thank you to our guests today. It's been fabulous. To everybody who works on who touches the show, not just works on it, but who puts in effort to make this happen. Our producers, everybody who asked questions today and put them in, the panelists who are here to help you and show up every single day, the entire crew and back-end force that is global and amazing. We're continuing to build. We're looking forward to seeing you. I'll be in Los Angeles tomorrow for our first day of Cinegear, and I'm looking forward to seeing a bunch of people in person. Courtney, I actually might get to shake your hand. I'm looking forward to that. So excellent. We will see you all tomorrow on the show. Thank you for watching, and let's roll credits.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I gotta edit one of my clips in LumaFusion this weekend. Cut it all together. Cut. I realize
you've given me the best justification when I tell my wife, no, I can't get rid of this phone. I need to keep it because I'm collecting old phones so I can do multicam.
Exactly. Right. Cameras.
I just collect them. All my old phones are my kids and my wife, and so the kids have 12s. My wife has 13. I have 14. And when I do multicam, I just have to collect everybody's cameras. Okay, lend me the cameras just for a second. We'll cut this together.
The question is, how much pushback do you get from, you can't take my phone away? My friends.
Technically, whose phone?